Welcome to OCP TV, the newsroom for the Open Compute Project Foundation. I'm Laura Noland at the 2020 OCP Virtual Summit. Joining me today is Vik Malyala, Senior Vice President, Field Applications Engineering and Business Development at Supermicro. Welcome to OCP TV, Vik.
Laura, thanks for having me here. Very excited to be at this first virtual event for the OCP. Quite excited, actually.
It is an exciting time. So let's start off by having our viewers get to know you a bit. Tell us about Supermicro and what Supermicro does.
Well, Supermicro has been in the business for about 26 years, and we specialize in providing application optimized server and storage products from enterprise to cloud to edge type of applications.
So how has Supermicro focused on green computing? Can you expand on that?
Sure. Green computing has been a very essential part of Supermicro's success so far. In this industry, as the size of deployments are getting bigger and bigger every day, one of the most important things is to make sure that we are able to run these infrastructure more efficiently. We are able to save the power, reduce the cost to the environment, in terms of all this contamination that will happen from end of life cycle products and whatnot. So what we focus on is to make sure that the products are optimized for a given application. That way we are able to use less power as they are running, and two, be able to run it in a data center environment without having to keep the air conditioning running at I would say it's maximum cooling and whatnot. That way, we are able to reduce the operational expenses and whatnot. So by providing the right combination of it, we are able to get the right computing platforms to the customers, and thus by kind of going with the green computing initiative.
You mentioned saving resources and a combination of those elements that you just mentioned. So what is a resource saving architecture? What does that look like?
Wow. It's in a broad sense, resource saving could be the human resource, the power, the components, the CapEx and OpEx side of it. But when we talk about, that is something that is there as a natural DNA for Supermicro. But when we are talking about resource saving architecture in this context, what we have seen is we kind of made it into multiple pieces of this overall infrastructure usage in the data center. One is, as I mentioned, about the capital expenditure. So getting the right size platform for a given application, number one, reduces the cost of the materials, and two, it actually reduces the amount of power and cooling it is required to run these things efficiently in a data center. That's the first part, right? And the second part of it is making sure that the systems are serviceable and manageable easily. That way we are able to save on the human expense in managing the systems in the data center afterwards. The third part of it is, as systems are going to be refreshed once in every 3 or 5 years, whole bunch of sheet metal, the PCBs, everything is dumped and recycled, right? So this is the part where we started to pay more attention to it, and what is that we can do to make sure that part of the system is going to be reusable. For example, the chassis, the fans, and the power supplies, and even the hard disk drives and whatnot, they have a very long life cycle. So when you're talking about, for example, refreshing just the compute part of it, or the networking, or storage, you can do that independently while keeping the rest of the stuff in place, which actually saves the cost to the environment. So this is where I think the overall resource saving architecture kind of starts from at a component level, all the way going into a deployment level and refreshing over multiple generations of the product refresh.
Well, very exciting, from a sustainability standpoint to, resources being renewed. Very exciting, and it seems like we've got a lot to talk about with this initiative. So as you're moving forward and developing with deploying and launching and executing and designing these architectures, what open standards does Supermicro embrace to move that all forward?
Fair enough. So if you take a look at the data center side, right? I mean, around 3% of the worldwide power is being consumed by the data centers and running the IT infrastructure. That's a huge deal, right? And when you look at the customers don't want to be locked down by a specific vendor. Say, even if I have the most efficient platform, that basically we do, if it is able to solve all these emissions and all these things in control, but still the fundamental problem is no one wants to be standardized on a single vendor or a single platform. So we need to make sure that we work with the industry leaders, and as a group we come together and provide the best solutions for the customers. So in other words, we cannot be locking down on a specific proprietary architecture, and we need to make sure that we kind of develop these based on open standards. That way all these customers can take advantage of that. So if you take a look at the x86 as a standard architecture, right? I mean, rack mount, whether it's a 1U, 2U, 4U and whatnot, as a 19-inch rack mount, that is a standard. So all our platforms are pretty much standardized on the standard 19-inch rack mount architecture and standard x86 architecture. When you go a step further, when you talk about drives, right? For example, hard disk drives and SSDs and NVMe drives, which is a standard U.2 form factor with a 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch hot pluggable drives, it is a standard. And if you're talking about I/O part of it, where standard PCI Express slots have been there for a long time, and we continue to support that, and pretty much it's there in every platform. In addition to that, what we have seen is, how do we make these platforms? Remember, I'm talking about resource saving architecture where people could be changing these things over time and making it easy for them to be serviced in the field. So we started looking into and working closely with Open Compute to see what are the things that we can take the best of the breed and incorporate into this to expand our portfolio based on the open standards. For example, OCP 3.0 is one of the standards for the networking connectivity, where we can have different type of I/O cards be able to be plugged in and serviceable externally. That way people don't have to open the boxes and all that. So that's one of them. And as the systems get deployed in the field, one of the things about is managing this piece of hardware, right, in a data center level. So we're also working with OCP in terms of getting the open BIOS and the open BMC supported on these platforms. Open BMC is a bit, I would say advanced in terms of its stability, which we've been working with some of the customers in incorporating into their platforms. And we are engaging with the customers in understanding the requirements for open BIOS. And on a GPU front, which is becoming very mainstream nowadays because of artificial intelligence and machine learning and whatnot. One of the standards that is also coming from the OCP community is about something called OAM, or Open Accelerator Modules. So the likes of NVIDIA or Intel, AMD, all of them are coming up with that standard, and we are going to support them in our platforms. So existing standards and the new standards that are coming up, how do we kind of blend it in and bring it to the customers, whether it is a hyperscaler or whether it is a tier 2, tier 3 cloud service provider, or even a smaller scale deployment. How do we make sure that we bring these standards, and that is being the background of and the DNA in terms of how we are bringing it all together for the customers.
Well, Vik, you mentioned, your collaboration and working, on that solution for, that scalability and bringing it to the customers. So as you're attending the OCP Summit, you're actually sponsoring for the very first time. Tell us what you're sharing with attendees, just to move that collaboration forward.
Absolutely. So if you take a look at it, OCP, a lot of standards that are being driven is actually be able to be applicable for a hyperscaler or a next tier type of customers who have a reasonable size of deployment. And we have seen many of our customers asking about what are the things that are happening in the OCP community and how they can actually take advantage of that in a platform that's made by Supermicro. So we are quite excited to be part of it because we get to actually share the development efforts that we are doing along with the OCP community, and all the new and latest technologies that are being specced in, and we are able to build some products out from that to bring it market the first and be able to enable these customers to adopt this. And whether they want to adopt this right away or in future, doesn't matter, because we are bringing the existing standards and the new standards together. So people have the flexibility to adopt when they can. They don't need to do it today, but when they feel comfortable, they can actually adopt it. So that's what we are trying to do.
Lots to cover at the summit for Supermicro for sure. Tell us what Supermicro and yourself hopes to take back from this year's event.
Oh, one of the things is that, we know, for example, what we have been doing with the OCP community, with the industry standards, with respect to platform security, platform serviceability, manageability, and the performance tuning and everything, right? And when we are bringing it to the customers, it's important for us to basically reach out to the customers, potential ones mostly, and the existing customers. And number one, awareness of these technologies available in Supermicro platforms. Number two, getting the feedback from the customers. As my role, actually, and for Supermicro, our job is to basically get the feelers from the customers and understanding their requirements and bringing it within to the company and working with engineering to get the right product out. So our goal here from this event is to reach out to as many customers possible and let them know that the advantages that they could have with the platforms based on open standards, and any feedback that they may have, they can reach out to us. That way we can make things better.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, lots to do at the summit for sure. So where can our viewers go to learn more about you and Supermicro?
Supermicro website is an excellent place to start with, www.supermicro.com, or you can talk to any of Supermicro sales representatives. We'll be able to set up a meeting or whatnot to talk to you about your requirements. And most importantly, I think we have plenty of products that are ready in terms of taking these open standards and be able to enable the customers to take advantage of it right away. That's what we want to be bringing to the customers in this event.
Sounds perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Vik. It was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, anytime. And thank you, viewers, for tuning into OCP TV. Enjoy the virtual show.